All right, let's call this order, call to order for roll call.
Mrs. Dozal. Here. Mr. Wright.
Here.
Mrs. Hawkins. Here. Mr. Salcido.
Here.
And Mr. Lopez is not here yet, but he is expected to be here, so.
All right, well, we'll move to, I think he'll be here shortly, so we'll just move on to item boards of action. Number two, we need to move to approve the appointments of Trey Taylor, a custodian, and the extra duty appointments of Ken Barrow, CG assistant softball coach.
I move that we approve Trey Taylor and Ken Barlow for the position stated.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just have a question. When these people are hired as their extra duty for coaching, are they told that they're not on the ASRS? Are they told that they're ESI?
These people aren't, they're back up with us.
Okay. Oh, so now coaches are back.
Yes, I no longer covers coaches. This is the first year that they've come back to us. And as far as Arizona State retirement, we do ask on their hiring sheet if they are currently in Arizona State retirement. Because if they work for the elementary school, then we do have to take Arizona State retirement out on them. If they don't work for another entity, then we don't have to. So we do ask that question now so that we know when to deduct and when not to deduct. And so those individuals are notified.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, Mrs. Dozal.
Yes.
Mr. Wright.
Yes.
Ms. Hawkins.
Yes.
And Mr. Salcido.
Yes, how you doing, Joe?
There he is. For the record, Mr. Lopez just arrived. It's 5:35.
All righty, so we're gonna move on to study session on a proposed policy review for information and discussion. Discussion is proposed policy HA negotiation goals, priorities, objectives, and HI rights and responsibilities of employees negotiating organizations. These policies will replace the current HD meet and confer recommendations and procedure policies. Okay, so we're gonna, has everybody had a chance to look at the meet and confer speaking points that Dr. Beebe looked at? Not yet? Yeah, but I think these are, every word kind of just going through it real quick. And so, so that way we stay the course of what we are doing, so that way we're all on the same page of it. So he did a really good job on outlining what we're doing, and the first question is why a new policy? The formal policy was created from sole purpose of removing the superintendent from the process. I have been concerned with since being hired, IBM process must include the superintendent as a leader of the district. The superintendent approves recommendations made by committee and then makes recommendations to the board. The board always has the final say. Creating a new policy that simplified the process was much easier than trying to amend a document that was created a year ago. So, any discussion on why a new policy? I think he kind of outlines the bullet points of the thought process that we're moving to a new policy for.
I do have a question. Was this initiated by you, Dr. Beebe? I noticed in the paper it said because it was executive session that you didn't answer that one question.
I was asked a question by the newspaper on whether the initiative to move to a new policy was mine or yours, and because we had that discussion in executive session, I did not answer because it's an executive session, and I should not answer anything that was discussed in executive session, so I did not.
But I can ask that question now, can't I? or is that not where, what exactly initiated this change of policy?
The change, well, I'm happy to announce that I was concerned after reading the policy after being hired, because after reading through the policy and the way the policy was written, you know, that it does not involve the superintendent, as I know the superintendent to be involved in the IBM process. That was a huge concern for me, and, you know, and that's the reason we met in Cleander, so I could share that concern with you. I have no problem sharing that.
All right, the next item is timing and feeling of sense of urgency. So these bullet points are all new board members not in place until January 8th. The new board members not in place until January 8th. Executive session on January 16th with the governing board. Sense of urgency is mine out of respect for the teachers. Certified evaluations done by March 1st. Contracts for 2019-20 are intended to be issued prior to spring break and due back in mid-April. Until the IBM policy is approved, we cannot begin the IBM process. My goal was to have had at least 2 IBM meetings, if not the entire process prior to contract being due. Entire process prior to contract being due. We would need to start IBM the beginning of March for us to happen. We may have to have contingency language in our contract if we do not finish the IBM process. You want to, any questions on?
And that's one of the things I did share in all 3 of my conversations is, you know, I've been more of a sense of urgency than you guys have, just because I've been through the process and trying to do that. We as a district always have to issue contracts as soon as possible, because we'll be competing with other districts that, you know, that are doing the same. And if we don't issue and secure our teachers, then you stand a chance of losing them. So, but again, I've always believed, and I've told the staff in all 3 of my meetings, you know, with them, that I've always firmly believed in putting all the cards on the table for the next coming school year, and everybody kind of knowing what to expect before you have to sign on that dotted line. And if we do not get through the IBM process, we may not be able to do that. So we may have to conclude the process after contracts come back in.
All right, the next question was, is the new policy legal? Yes, after drafting the policy from the notes taken in executive session, I sent the policy to our legal counsel for approval and recommendations. All recommendations made by legal counsel were adopted prior to the H policy becoming an agenda item on Tuesday night. The new policy mirrors the Cascadia Elementary School District policy with some modifications to fit our district. Districts do not have to have H policies, and many districts do not.
And those that don't have the policies and just have procedures, is that correct?
Yeah, for instance, Cape Creek, the site where I came from, they do not have H policies written into their policies, but they go through the IBM process every single year, and there are procedures or like a regulation like we would have to go with policy. There are procedures that are followed every year, but they do not have it as part of their policies. In fact, there are many districts that don't have H policies.
All right, Y2 committees and 2 meetings. Classified staff and certified staff have very different concerns based on the nature of their jobs. Many times in combined meetings, much of the conversation does not apply to one group or the other. We desire to hear the voice of our employees, and I have experienced 2 committees in other districts that better allows this to happen. So, any questions on that question? Discussion?
And I think this was this is an effort to try to improve the IBM process. Because our thoughts were, if this was one way we could improve the IBM process for both groups,
And if you look at the numbers that I gave you from the 3 meetings that I had, the classified employees outnumbered all the rest of the groups that came. And again, we had some great dialogue, and you can see some of the questions that were asked. I think I was able to answer individual questions and clarification. I've actually had some questions since, and I've had some classified people tell me they feel like this will be a better process, and that it has been awkward at other times when they both have been table at the same time.
All right, moving on to why the makeup of the committee? Why the makeup of the committees? Is the board trying to devalue the association? The certified committees will be made up of 8 employees, 2 directors, and 2 administrators. The reason for the 5-2-1 is based on numbers of employees in each category. The certified employee will vote and self-select their committee to represent them. The group will also select a spokesman from their 8 representatives. The certified committee will be made up of an association president, the association president, and 8 teachers, 2 directors, 2 administrators. The 8 teachers may all be members of the association or a mix of associations and non-association teachers. The certified staff will vote and self-select the 8 teachers that will represent them. The association president is the spokesman for the certified group. The human resource director will be present at both meetings to answer questions that may relate to the board policy. The association is not being devalued. The president is guaranteed to be at the table. We want to hear all the certified employees' voices, and the reality is that less than 50% of the teachers in Casper Union High School District are association members, and more than 50% of the teachers are non-association. The certified staff will decide who they feel best represents their interests when they vote.
Can you explain on the first bullet, the 5-2-1?
Yeah, so if you look at the policy, for today, so, and again, I apologize, it should be classified, I certified that for a second. The classified, we broke it down to 5 classified at-will employees, 2 exempt employees, and 1 related service employee, and that makes a total of 8. And the reason for that is that's in proportionate to the number of employees in that group. So then when we vote, we would do the electronic ballot, and so only the classified at-will employees would vote for the 5 classified at-will people to represent them, and likewise, the 2 exempt employees, that will be only voted by exempt employees, and then the 1 related, only by related, so that way each group gets to select their person to go to the table, and then from the 8, they will elect a spokesperson to represent that entire group.
The 8 on the certified, how do you guarantee that they will be representing all the different sites?
There isn't a way, and there hasn't been a way in our district. My understanding is we did not have that, we have not had that. And we've talked about that a little bit, because I think if you look at the 2 sites, if you look at Casa Grande Union, you look at Vista Grande, I think both sites would like to make sure they have representation at the table. But we have to also remember, we also have Desert Winds here, who those teachers represent both schools simultaneously. So we just follow the practice the way it would be, in that, they, again, everybody, the certified staff will get to vote their own people in, and there's about as many teachers on each campus, so they do have the ability to influence who they think best represents them.
So basically, it's gonna be an election of one, basically, everybody's gonna, it don't matter what school, depending on you're either certified or classified.
So like we talked about, so if you look at the next page in the process, once the, the policy is, once we have an approved policy, then we'll create electronic ballots. I'm gonna work, what I've told the staff is, and which we really discussed ourselves, I would send out an invitation to all employee groups to submit their name if they were interested in serving. on the committee to Mary Ann and HR, so we can collect the names. And we'll put a timeline. Once we have that timeline and we have all of the date, we have all the names, then we'll put it to electronic ballot. We'll send out that electronic ballot, again, with a timeline to vote and return it. It will be done in such a way that everybody can only vote one time. And then once we have that data, we'll be able to put together the committee. And we'll be able to put together the committee then and start moving forward. And then again, what I had hoped to do is while we are in the process of voting and doing all that, is to work with Mike Wagner as the association president, and he and I to start, interviewing and talking with potential moderators so that we can agree upon a moderator who will lead the IBM process for our district. And I've already started to collect some names from other individuals, other superintendents, people that I've known that we might reach out to.
So, you have anything, comments on the process that we're doing, or anybody else?
No, I would hope that those out there would know that, we tried to be fair for the circumstances, or I tried to be fair last year, and we're still trying to be fair. We're trying to make it so it's a win-win for everybody. I think as a district, we've done a 180 from where we were, and I like the direction we're going, and I feel like everybody will be protected and represented with this, and hopefully they trust us.
It's all built on trust,
Well,
we have to show that trust, and we have to build the trust.
we have to build the trust, and I mean, I think we started to build it, and now we're changing, so I think it probably makes them a little bit concerned. Hopefully,
But I think,
I have nothing but respect for the certified staff and everything, so I just hope that hopefully they will trust us some more. Haven't forgotten the past, and I just really am concerned. I want them to trust that we are looking out for everybody going forward. But I do feel like we've made changes here to where everything is gonna be so much better for everybody in the district, and I like the direction we're going. Like I said, we've done a 180 from where we were a year ago, and so hopefully they'll feel more comfortable going forward.
So in this discussion, are we allowed to take questions from the floor, or? And so I open this up to the floor. I mean, I think we use the word trust, and so that, it's a big word to me. I mean, so and it's something that's earned, not given, so I definitely want to hear, Mike, I mean, any comments from you? I mean, I think this is the only way this is gonna work, and we're gonna change what we've done in the past, is to do something that's different, and yeah, we have to go have a little leap of faith, and we have to change what we've been doing, because it's. So I open the floor up to you, and then we really want your input and really take what you have to say into consideration. Or I opened it up to everybody, I'm sorry, but I would love to hear some feedback from you.
Well, I do believe that the relationship should be built on a lot of trust. And that's the foundation of what the certified staff should have with the district. And I honestly do believe that in part with this new policy, and addressing some of those things that the superintendent feels the way it was written, it tends to omit the role that he should have. But I don't think that scrapping the entire policy that we were using is the right direction. Because the IBM policy is built inside that meeting procedure already. Why is it impossible to not continue with what we have, not recreate something or create something new this year, and instead use the IBM policy to modify what we've already got and make it work for everybody's best interest. Include the superintendent in there through some negotiations or whatever it takes, sitting at the table, rather than just completely trashing everything that we've got. We've only allowed 1 year to let it work. 1 year is not enough. We witnessed that at both sites when we try to change something up there. We give it a 1 year time frame and we don't let it grow. So I don't really think that we've given our current policy enough time. I mean, you could potentially just sit at the table and make amendments to where we need those amendments. My concern is it's related to urgency. I guess the real question that everybody's got, that nobody has said to me yet, but I'm sitting here wondering, what is it that the superintendent is concerned that will come out of the IBM process that he just cannot recommend to the board?
Well, I'm gonna speak to, what he wrote. I read some of the stuff he wrote before and what you touched on right now, and so the change of why such the urgency, I mean, so you look, I'm pretty black and white person, so the fundamentals of building things, when you look at, how we defined, majority, 30% is a majority, so terms like that, we redefine words like that, you know, recommendations, I was on the board, and again, I do not, the first thing I do is want to go backwards, but I was on the board that voted in, last year's policy, and so if you look at some of the fundamentals of what's written here, that's the sense of urgency. If you look at some of the wording on it, and it's not so much, we still, I didn't hear from you specifics of what this policy does not give you or take away from you. And so,
The current policy defines several rights and privileges that the association would actually have, such as postings in certain areas or things like that. And I don't know which part of the policy that was in, but that's all stripped out of it now. Now, at any point in time, say Dr. Beebe, he doesn't stick around for more than 2 years, and we get some new superintendent in who doesn't have the mentality that he has. And I have a lot of respect for Dr. Beebe. I'm not speaking against him in any means right now. It's very plain. No angst towards anyone. But what if somebody else comes in and just has no respect for an association at all? Are we going to change another policy? Are you going to back the certified staff then? Or are we going to go with the feelings of this new superintendent who just is going to bulldoze us?
well, the word us that you use right here, so that's what, the us is all of us. I mean, not just the association. And so to say that it's a given that the association is the body or the voice of the body, I mean, because right now, in order to get things done, it has the body of the group here. I mean, we can look at percentages and whatnot at 30% of the association, but the body is the other piece. And so in order for us to be successful at making something, the doers are the body. And so that's where we have to go off of constructing something that we could get things done. And what we're saying here is that, and that's what we want. We want, if there's change, we want to write good policy. So if any one of us change, we have a good policy that we could fall on, and we could actually sustain replicating what we do well for our students. And so here we're granting, the old policy granted 4 positions and the president of the association off of what merit? And does that represent what the people wanted? Or this way right here, we're giving everybody an equal opportunity. So if your association, or if the association is the body of it, it's going to be representative on what's going on here. And if it's not, we're giving equal so in order to sustain and to create a well-ran or well-working organization, we have to give everybody equal rights of what's going on. And so that's why it's shortened, and it gives everything like that. So it may be all association people, but this is the right way of doing it, and this is the fair way of doing it. And it's about to warrant your the association's presence, we think it's very important to have there, and so that way that's why we give them a seat. They have a seat at it no matter what. And so we warrant and we respect and the association's presence, and that's why it's not a voted on position. It's a built-in, it's part of the foundation of it. So, I hope that helped out with where our directions on that is. I mean, so, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, the policy itself doesn't outline what Dr. Beebe outlined in terms of how we vote or how the members would be elected. That might be something that should be in there, to say that it's done through HR or who's in charge of it. I know last year it was the association's responsibility to put that survey out, to ask who wanted to volunteer. We only had a select number of volunteers, so we all sat on the committee. So sometimes it does come down to that. Last year's big issue was the agreed upon facilitator. That took us upwards of 3 months. So this policy doesn't currently outline who's going to agree upon the facilitator. I know I heard Dr. Beebe say working with Mike, but where in the policy, the old policy said it was the meet and confer committee's job to agree upon a facilitator. And we had a lot of back and forth about who makes that decision, who interviews. That alone took us 3 or 4 months, and that put us well past the contract date. So there's no verbiage in here as to who sits on the committee to agree upon that facilitator. Is it last year's group? Is it this year's? Under the old policy, the new group would reconvene and determine the new facilitator.
Thank you. Great input.
Yeah,
No,
that would
that's-
save us a lot of time if we knew exactly how, where, when, who's in charge of putting input into that, because we had to agree upon it as a group, and that took a long time.
Thank you.
I'd just like to provide a little context for where the policy came from, because it wasn't created by the association 2 years ago in response to the drama that we have had. This policy has been floating around since you guys were under coherent governance, which was 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I'm not even sure. And it was taken.
Came in my second year, so it's that was 3 years ago.
Okay, so it's been floating around since then, and we took it specifically from the Dysart district because the Dysart district was using coherent governance. And we said, hey, that's a good place to start. It was, I certainly, you all know that I've been pretty involved in this process, and there was never a conversation ever of how do we cut the superintendent out of this. Not one. I understand where that perception might come from, but it's not one that we ever had. We certainly wanted, I don't even look at the policy and think the superintendent is cut out because admin is there and the superintendent is admin. There was never an intent to circumvent the superintendent. We would all assume that the people representing the board at the table are talking to the superintendent, and they're not gonna take us down a path that the superintendent's gonna come back and look at our agreement and say, oh God, no. I mean, that is not our intention. We want to have something that the superintendent will have and the board will agree to. It was never the intention to cut out the superintendent. I think that's where a lot of mistrust comes from the board perhaps towards the teachers towards the board. We all know that the last couple of years were very, very stressful and dramatic, and we don't want that to be happening. We don't want that to be happening here, which is why I think a lot of us echo what Mike says and say we should be reforming this policy at the table, because it did work last year, and Tony, I heard you say several times, in order for things to work, we have to change this policy, but I don't know what didn't work last year.
Well, let me talk to you what happened last year with the superintendent. I maybe just strike that conversation right, that comment, but the real purpose of changing this is it's not fundamental. I mean, you think about, it comes back to majority people, voting people. This gives an opportunity to let the body vote. This is fundamentally, it has nothing to do with what happened in the past. I was part of the coherent governance. It took me a little while to wrap my head around what's going on with that, but we had to do something different on that one also.
Oh, right.
And so I'm with you on that. And so the thing of it is, we're here today and we want to move forward. And this right here, and we had a lot of different changes going through, and maybe last year's policy was a step into improvement. And so we have to look at it that this is a positive change. Not that we didn't give it a chance or something like that. It lets us look at the light of of actually defining things correctly, making something that will work when we're gone. And when we're getting another 2 years, we're gonna have new board members, we're gonna have different thought processes. I guarantee you, my thought process between the first 5 years has changed in the last 5. So changes, it's hard, but I think what we did last year and what you did last year is the first step in improving what we're doing. And so I guess my ask of you is just, no, we're sitting here trying to make something that we have work, and by adding more things to it. And what we're presenting to you is something that we feel as a group, as a board, will move us in one more step higher than we are right now in the right direction. So,
Can I say something?
Sure.
I can't remember exactly what it was, but I do remember myself specifically, the subject of having the superintendent involved. And I voted against it as a board member when we were going through the policy. So I do know that he was removed to some degree, because I do remember talking about it. I do remember us as board members arguing because we had done it. And that was because I wanted the certified teachers to be able to have a voice. And I have nothing but respect. I've seen you in IBN and in negotiations, and I've seen you be totally fair. And I really feel like probably in the future, because you are good at it, and you understand what's going on in the district and everything, that you will probably, hopefully be maybe one of the people at the table again, because you're very good and very fair and very knowledgeable. I really hope, and he has said that he would, that he will be here for 8 years, because that was one of the questions when we hired him, and this is year 1. And I really do feel like we are going 180 degrees. I feel like you're gonna have respect. I think you're gonna be listened to, and hopefully, we can work together and go forward. And if there's something that we need to change in this, because believe me, I know where we've been, and I don't wanna go that direction ever for anybody. But I really do feel like, we're going in a better direction now, and I think that everybody is gonna be recognized. I think they're going to be appreciated, and I think your talents and everything are not gonna be unrecognized, and I think that you're going to be, I think it's just gonna be different for you, hopefully, and hopefully it already is. But I think you see the teachers that come and everything, and I think we'll have probably the same people at the table for IBM, regardless of what our policy is. Those are the people that come, and I've seen them be nothing but extremely fair and very good at it. And I think one of the things, the first thing that we did right here is we made sure that we would always have a neutral facilitator right up front, and there would never be any way to have it without that, and you will always have that. So we had any of the words changed from may to will or shall, and make sure that you are neutrally, that you are represented and your voice will be heard.
Well, I agree with the comments made, about the selection process not being really outlined in here.
Yeah.
As well as deciding upon the facilitator. And I do think that the past group should be the ones to decide on the facilitator, not the new group. Just because I think they have the experience of what the process should look like. They've seen what it shouldn't look like. And that, now, there is a lot of trust in this, and I've sat on this where principals and past superintendents have geared faculty into choosing particular people that were like-minded to them and had they shouldn't have been at the table, because all they were representing were their own selves. And I think by being an association member, you look at the big picture. The first few years I was here, there were the same people at the table, and I can remember 3 of them, but we never even thought twice about them being the representatives, because they took all the burden of having to negotiate off of me until they came to me and asked me to be part of it. But I never had to even think about, because I trusted Mr. Mitchell, I trusted Mr. Birdsong. Those people were the ones that did all the negotiating, and we never, they would come up with an agreement, they'd come up with a salary schedule, and just like what they do now, they put it out for everybody to vote on it. It's not just the association that votes on it. I think by not identifying that the association would be the group, I think you're putting a burden back onto some people that don't want to be involved. And up until last year, everybody had a chance to be at the table. They've always asked, hey, do you want to? It wasn't just association, but that's who ended up being there. And honestly, when you think about your own businesses, don't you have people that you trust to do certain things? And would you really put it out for volunteers? Hey, who wants to do this job? Maybe you will start training those new people, but don't you want to go with the people that you trust and that know what is in the best interest of the students? Not saying that someone new at the table doesn't know, but they don't see the big picture. They don't always see beyond their own department. They don't see beyond their own classroom, whereas the association members, I would say most of them have been with the district many years. The ones that are going to sit at the table are the ones that know how to look at a salary schedule to make sure that it is fair and equitable. I never took the insurance from this district, but yet I've sat at the table and I made sure it was fair to everybody. And I could have excused myself and said, you know what, I'm not going to attend those meetings because it doesn't affect me. But because I wanted I wanted to make this district the best it could be, so we would attract quality teachers, and I think last year we had very little turnover. So the group that was there last year apparently did a great job. And I would like to see at least for 1 year, and then let them decide. Let that group, the certified, the classified, decide, what tweaks need to be. Maybe we do a combination of the two, what's here, and then include like the board recognizing the association as representative of the certified personnel in non-administrative positions within the district, except for substitute employees. Put that wording back into here for the composition for 1 year. Let them do the tweaking of it. They're our experts. They're the ones that have the trust. That's why I think a lot of people didn't show up for these these meetings with Dr. Beebe. To them, it's a non-issue. They know, these people have handled it for me. We got great raises last year. It doesn't affect them. They don't realize all the changes coming. And if someone does have a complaint about what is going on, they send out surveys to everyone. Maybe by changing who sends out the survey that comes from the district office, instead. I don't think people don't participate because I think the reason they don't participate is just they have a lot of trust in what the system has already done.
In life, it's usually an 80-20 rule, and 20% participate if you're lucky.
Yeah. If there is someone out there that wants to really participate with this, have them contact Dr. Beebe, see if, is there a place that they can be heard? Yeah, I can't see that that people are not being heard in what the process was.
Well, I think a lot of us too, us agreeing on this, I think you see it from a perspective, I think us, especially me moving forward, I've heard it the other side. And that's why I'm moving forward with this, as far as being heard and making a difference. And we talk about, you used the word volunteer. They're all teachers, they're all professionals. They all put their time in, and they all want a voice. And sometimes and this was a direct quote, I've been here a long time, so I've known to take a lot of advice from people that have pictures on walls and things around here, and so, and, you know, and people that retired from here and looking at what actually has occurred. And so the thing is to avoid going through the cycle that we've had in our community since the last 30 years or whatever it is that we need to make things, we can't assume, and we have to make things fair where they work. And I'm not discrediting them, but we have a lot of good people that have been here and know how to do things, and if we have good policy in there, they're gonna still be the ones that we go to, and still are the ones that we take care of. So I'm gonna have to, on all this, the change that we're looking for is, and there's a reason for it, we're gonna make more fundamental decisions that are based off of just, I think all the people that are normally, like you're saying, that normally know everything, they're still gonna be the leaders of our district, but we're gonna do it in a place that we're, in a way that we could actually replicate what we did. And so, I don't know where we go with the conversation with more of that. I mean, so, I think but the point of it is we wanna make sure we talk to everybody.
Mr. President, members of the board, I understand where Ms. Dolzall is coming from as far as the longevity, the expertise, and the history. My only thing is that when you open it up to an election, a free election inside the district, elected by your peers, for anybody who wants to volunteer to be at the table, then that does give everyone an opportunity to sit at the table that wants to, and the peers get to vote for who they want to represent them, and chances are there might be one new face, maybe not. This year there was a new face. If we'd had that policy in place, Rebecca wouldn't have sat on that team. So, I mean, I just think that by opening up, just as a suggestion, that the same people probably will be elected, but at least the peers can say, I did do that, I voted for those people. So, I mean, that's just my 2 cents.
I have more questions regarding what actually has to happen at IBN. Last year's policy dictated how many items each group could bring, and we had issues over what was an item, what is the board expecting. All of that's been removed. So part of the struggle I have is I didn't come in as an association member. As a rule, if I'm a T-3 in the district, I'm an association member because my job's on the line a little bit more under fire potentially because I don't have that 3-year not really tenured protection. So I joined, but I wanted to sit as a special ed teacher because a lot of times sped teachers were in IEP meetings. That's why a lot of us couldn't go to some of the other ones. We already had meetings scheduled Thursday, Friday, Monday when Dr. Beebe was having his meeting. And there was no other way to get the information. We did ask if his talking points could be emailed out to staff, and we were told that that was not going to happen. So that was a concern I had, that if the talking points can be given in a meeting, why couldn't they be emailed out to all staff now that we've had those meetings? Could some of those talking points by the board be directed to be emailed out to answer those questions? I couldn't even go to any of them. I had other commitments after school myself that I couldn't bump to attend those. Could a survey come from the board? That way we know we've gotten input from all staff instead of having to go back through the IBM process. Could a survey go out addressing, are you aware that there's a policy change? A lot of staff don't read the board docs. We didn't even know. I only knew because I got an email from my association president saying this is on the board agenda. I happen to have sat at lots of school board meetings in previous districts, so I know how to look through board docs and find them. A lot of staff, we don't get trained in that. We don't waste our time to look through that until there's an issue. And when you've been in a district where there's been a lot of restructuring, new superintendents, 2 new principals, a whole new school board, budgeting issues. When I worked in Toltec, we went through a lot. But that all came because of my membership in the association. So some of that information may not actually be getting out to everyone yet. And just as a staff member who wants to come to all of these, I mean, my kids are sitting at home, getting that information out by email before you make your final vote may give you more of what you're looking for. Survey questions, things like that.
You'll notice that the ones that are here, how many are not association members of the teachers that are here? You know, they're the ones that are involved. Where are the others?
Yeah, no, that's a great question.
I can speak from Union. Most of my sped teachers at Union know I sit on this committee, so that's one less committee that all of us have to go to. And there are several people who will come to board meetings, they'll come when they can to things, but they have other commitments. So as the sped teacher, I work very closely with our resource teachers and whoever I can to say, hey, this is being brought up at Meet and Confer, what are your thoughts? And then we have a tendency to meet on off weeks as well. So there are times when those people can be heard and things like that. And from my experience last year, the way it was elected was not on the certified side. The struggle was on the classified side because it contained multiple salary schedules, multiple issues, and the people at the table that were a majority vote elected really couldn't speak. So from where we were sitting, changing the numbers on the classified side might be a way to go to where it may not need to be one classified. That related services group in particular had a lot of questions because they were not represented at the table, and they are such a small portion, but they are a separate salary schedule. So that was a huge area where we were like, what do we do? I couldn't help that related service person because I'm on the salary group. I can't even bring that to the table. And then if we're in two separate groups, we don't even hear that conversation. We don't know if it's actually been brought up.
Yeah.
I sat on the committee last year, and it was my first experience. It hadn't been the experience in the past that we were asked as directors to sit on the committee. People were appointed by our former superintendent. I guess if I could just take a step back for a moment and ask maybe for some clarification. I taught in this district as well. I was an association member for 1 year. I don't think that's what this is about. I was a very active and involved educator. I cared about my community, I cared about my kids. I think, I just want to make sure I'm understanding, because I hear the tone in the room as though we're debasing our association, and I don't see that at all. I'll be quite honest with you. I think the language in the IBN process now is very much honors the association voice, honors the voice of our classified individuals. I don't want us to get away from that. I want us to remember that, and I'll be honest, I wasn't in favor of, I said this publicly, if you remove any voice from the superintendent, what's the point of having one? And so in my mind, that's what this revision of this particular policy or this MOU or IBN process is. It's not hearing from everyone involved. I think, people will be elected. You're right. We're going to see the same people at the same table, right? We understand that. There is a lot of trust. But there's also people who don't have time to know what's happening. I will say that for the first time in many years, I trust this superintendent who cares about building climate, who cares about hearing from his teachers, his classified staff, his directors. We've not felt that here in a very long time. And so I'd just like us to remember, this is not about removing the association or dishonoring that membership. I think it really is clarifying that we are asking everyone to come to this table, and that we're still, this board hired this superintendent. What does it say if you remove that superintendent's voice from a process? I'm confused by that. So I've worked well with these people. We worked well together last year. It was not comfortable many times. And there was hearing from classified and certified staff. There were classified folks who did not want to say what they felt in a whole group meeting. You know that. People were uncomfortable. There were feelings hurt. Our teachers felt like they were being viewed as bullies at times. I know that because they said that to me. So I think the process as laid out in this IBN is very clear and it's very fair. I don't think it's limiting anyone's voice is what I guess what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to keep like the policy that we're working on now, the new one, but I'd like to add some things into it. There's just a few things like Rebecca has said, there's some few things that we need to have in there. And then, other than just saying Casa Grande Association president, I would like to have a minimum number of whatever we represent, whatever we think that the association represents, be guaranteed at least that number
So,
of the group.
so the whole objective is to make sure they have a voice.
Mhm.
And so how many voices, how many more voices do you have as more than the president? I mean, you have the president on there, so he's representing, and everything goes, one of his duties is, as a president, is to be the spokesman for the group, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you have a spokesman that's there every time, and he's the chairman. Not only the spokesman, of his association, he's of that group. And so, the fairness of the group is where it's going to be to his charge is whether if it has 9 or 8 association members, or if it's 0, his job is still the same, and he still represents the association in the same manner, but he still has the influence, or whatever you want to call it. And so, if you have 3 or you have 4 or whatever, we're recognizing that he's a very crucial part of making this process successful. That's why he's there.
As an association member, I wasn't concerned that the association was taken in or out. I didn't understand why we scrapped an entire policy and a full brand new one was brought in. When last year, every time we turned around, we were like, well, what does the IBN policy tell us? What does the meeting confer policy tell us? Oh, this says that if we don't understand the process, the board will tell us to go back to the process. So every time we turned around, the previous policy forced us to turn in on ourselves and say, we don't get to leave this table until we didn't have a spokesperson elected for each group. I don't know why we need a spokesperson. Now, Mike shouldn't have to speak. We literally sat at the groups and said, who wants to talk about this issue? Who has more information?
So it doesn't matter if we have how many association members now, if we have.
But I feel like other things were taken out, not just in the association piece, that other pieces of that policy that were removed are taking out the general voice and the general point of the process. A new IBN policy should go back to IBN. For us to make changes to the IBN policy, we have to go either to the board in September under the old policy, asking to become a separate group, or we have to go to the IBN committee. So then we go through this new process, we get a new policy.
Who's us when you say us?
Anybody, if you have a concern, if I say I want this brought to the table, I have to go to my IBN members, get my members to bring it to the table, then it has to go to the board. But then in one fell swoop, the policy that I just spent a year figuring out how to navigate, you just undercut my feet and gave me a new policy.
Well, progress does that sometimes. I mean, so it's because there was a policy the year before that also.
Right.
And so we're trying to get it, and if you see where we were 3 years before that, we didn't have we had a policy that we could not execute.
Right.
And so we're going to, you're right, it's changed, and then we're going through, so our ask is that, we're trying to, again, our overall goal is to be able to sustain and replicate success. And so with some of these terms in here, you can read that, I mean,
Right.
And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to tune it up, and it's gonna look a little different than last year.
Right.
And hopefully we get to a point, and with your input, I mean, that's why we respect everybody's input here. And so there's something that we can change in there, but till we get it to where we want it, I agree with you, because what I'm hearing from you is not so much the association, but it's the actual change that we're doing. And so I agree with you. I don't want more change, it's more, but we need to get it to a point, because the bottom line is, we're not producing students that we know we could do. We're not, I want to say products, we're not producing a product that we know we could deliver. Because we have some of the best talent here, we have the best resources, and so in order to do that, to not have more of the same, we've got to do some changes. We got to tune this thing up. And that's what this discussion's about. And I agree with you, you're gonna have to, hopefully we don't have to do it too many times, but we have the discussion next year, we're gonna go, but hopefully we get it closer to where we want it, and everybody, and we're gonna all have to, believe me, I was on the boat last year looking at some of the things, You know, I'll say this right now, I love the part that Connie's on our group right now, because no, she brings questions up that makes you think, and I love it, and that's what we need. I mean, just like what you're doing right now, so if we don't listen to those and work off of those, you know, shame on us. And so, again, we're trying to be very transparent, and that's why we're spending, this is our third meeting, and we're make sure we're communicating, but again, we were elected to do the best thing for the body of our community, and so that we're gonna try to consider all these things, and I ask that, you kind of look at what we're doing today, and again, yes, I hear you with your changes and whatnot, and people like you are gonna figure it out and make it even better for us, so,
Something that,
Good.
I was just gonna say, something that might help as far as knowing what to be expected of you is in this, you're gonna attend IBN training.
But
Prior to.
the big issue is the agreed upon facilitator, because we all had our meeting and we sat down and one group said the facilitator that you just brought in was not agreed upon by this group. So is it the previous IBN, is it the currently, who is actually in charge? And that language was not clear at all. And that took us 3 to 4 months because we had to interview and the IBN group did the interviewing. That alone is gonna put us past contracts. And I think that's why we're wondering, like, IBN could have started 3 months ago under the old policy to look at the new policy that the board wanted. IBN could already be meeting and looking at the changes that you would like. It could have been brought as a concern, hey, we wanna add some things, we feel like something's missing. The group is only being delayed by the need to change the policy right now. The group could have met any time. Last year, we started meeting in September.
How do you see deciding the facilitator?
How do I see it?
Yeah.
I can just speak from past practices that we've used, and generally it's been, you know, I've been where, so the association president's always been involved, and then usually, you know, it's been the HR director, it's been, you know, associate superintendent, you know, usually getting 2 or 3 candidates, bringing them in, doing an interview, and then deciding who you want to move forward with. That's some of the past practice I've experienced in a couple of districts. I haven't, it's never been a long, I mean, usually we get 3 people. First of all, you got to find people who are available, people who are willing, and then obviously have the ability to meet your time frame. So you're finding those, you know, so that's why, you know, again, you know, and some of the things I'm hearing is some of the things I've explained in my meetings about how the process would work are not in the document. You know, they're not in that document. They're also not in a lot of documents if you go to other boards, you know, H policies and do that. But it doesn't mean you couldn't create a regulation that would go with this H policy that would outline the process. You know, just like a lot of our policies, they have regulations.
Actually, this is a regulation.
Well,
This part of the process is.
well, I guess it is. So we can add it
So
in.
this is something that doesn't,
Yeah.
it's not the policy.
Right, right.
You don't vote on this as policy.
But
This
you're
is-
only voting on the policy,
this is
the
regulation.
makeup, the thing and all that is there, so. And just to clarify too, again, and I feel bad now because just the comment was just made, I do not remember being ever asked to share my speaking points. I was asked by 2 different people if I was going to be recording my session, and I said, I am not, do not plan on recording that, but I do plan on talking 3 different times at 3 different locations so that hopefully everybody can come. I don't remember anybody, and I'll go back and search my email, I don't remember anybody asking me for my speaking points. And I would be happy to share them with everybody if you'd like me to. Obviously, they were my speaking points for me, so as you can see, they need to be cleaned up a little bit before I'm gonna give them out for somebody else to make sense of them. But they're my speaking points, so.
Yeah, and I apologize, I think they were good, because no, again, transparency is one of my objectives, I mean, of here, and so, again, we appreciate you coming out, and we value your comments. Jeff,
Well, in the spirit of transparency and trust and whatnot, and if I'm reading things correctly, this policy is going to go forward. And the association will be unhappy about that because it does strip our recognition, and we're not happy about that. We're happy that the president will be on there and is guaranteed a spot, and and that's fantastic. There are some other small things, like dealing with the facilitator, and as Dr. Beebe just said, you know, the procedural things, I think if at least that part were able to be on the table, then, you know, let's create those rules together, because there's some language in here that I think really needs to be cleaned up, but you guys might not see that because you haven't done this for the last, you know, 15 years. Let's have that group of the regular people say, all right, who's gonna determine the facilitator? Does it need to be the whole group? Does it need to be a subcommittee? How are we going to determine who sends out that email, or who determines the composition? Because frankly, this is my 5th superintendent, and I have no reason to think that there's anything bad about the superintendent. But 2 of my previous 4 superintendents absolutely tried to control who was on our committee by saying, hey, who's put in for it? Oh, I want you to be on the committee. And that's something that would be a serious red flag to us. So if Mike could be the one to say, all district teachers, if you want to do it, you know, we're putting the trust in you that this is not going to be bad for us. Put the trust in us to determine who sits on that team from the at-large group. Just removing district entirely from that.
And
Those are the kinds of things that if we say, all right, go forward with the policy, because I don't want to keep fighting a losing battle forever to get recognition, which I do think is very important, and I could happily talk to any of you about it for as long as you want me to. But I don't want to keep fighting that battle, so let's say we'll agree to put the policy on the table so we can work out those tweaks from the group of people that knows what tweaks need to be made, with, of course, the full support of the superintendent.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because you nailed one of the points of having inconsistency with what's going on. And so, again, how you create manage inconsistencies, you make something that is solid, and that's why a vote in there it takes out that inconsistency. And so, you know, the people that are gonna do things, and that's why good policy will, you've been through 5 different superintendents, and you have different ways of doing things on each one of them. And so you have different actions, and so that's why, even more so, I think the way we have it written up with the voting part of it and making it fair is that it's gonna be done the same way that each time. It doesn't have anything to do with the superintendent. He doesn't have anything with him dictating who's gonna be on the board. And so it takes that element of selecting our group out of the picture. So again, I just wanna let you know that we are grateful that you came out, and we respect what you're saying, and we learned a lot of things, and this is how you make things better, by asking and communicating. It's not always sending a group of people in. It's all of us that need to be here today and hash it out. And I appreciate, we are going to go back to the drawing board on some of these things, and because you made some good points on defining what we're doing here. I don't know, anybody else have any comments?
I wanted to just voice in on, I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Rebecca.
Rebecca. You mentioned that you go round and round with that 8-page policy, and you're trying to look for clear answers. My question to you is, doesn't simplification make more sense to not have to spend all that time looking for that? Like you said, you spent 3 or 4 months trying to find a facilitator and trying to find a person that could fit in this one category. And yet you've got all this other verbiage that you yourself said that you're trying to clear up. You're trying to find a simple answer. So I'm thinking, doesn't getting rid of some of that other clutter make it simple so that it's understandable for not only the board but also for the members of the teachers?
I would say sometimes in education, when you take too many things out, that leaves too many opinions at the table. And when you're coming from an admin perspective versus a classified that's hourly versus certified, where we do have a few other protections and we do have mandates from the legislation for our salaries sometimes the ambiguity leaves too much at the table, and we spend more time going around. So that simple word, an agreed upon facilitator, our superintendent interprets as he brings people to the table. And I can tell you from last year's group, they would say, nope, he's completely out of the process. So it's the interpretation of the word that the previous policy said was the team's job to decide what that meant. And we all had to come to a consensus, which meant everyone had to either agree or live with the decision. Some of the wording in that previous document meant if you weren't at the table that day, you didn't get a vote. I didn't like that part. I want that changed, but I know to get it changed, I have to get on IBN this year, and I have to bring that up before it ends. Some of the wording on last year's was you only had 5 items. So people were upset because their item didn't make the cut. And that's where, oh, the association, or oh, this person, no, your item just wasn't at the top 5 because we were limited on what we could bring to the table instead of just bringing all of our concerns that our survey. So some of that language in how it should be brought to the table was rough. And some of that may not need to be so concise, but some of this other stuff, it opens up a new can of worms. That word agreed upon alone, I'm like, who's doing the agreeing? Because last year that was a huge concern from one main group. So we had to open it up for everybody to go back, get a new facilitator. But sometimes that limited language for educators, we need it to be a little more laid out and a little more specific so that everybody comes to the table with the same expectation.
All right, well, I think,
So does the regulation have to, the wording, you know, about the facilitator, the procedures, the selection process, does all of that have to be in place prior to us adopting the policy? Do we have to make changes to this first before we want that included?
If you wanted the selection, if you wanted to add to the regulation that already exists, if you wanted to add the selection process for the facilitator, then you would have to add that. That would have to, because it's not in there now.
Do we ask then the last group come up with some
Right.
wording and work with the
Yeah,
superintendent?
But it's also important to remember that when you approve a policy, you're not approving the regulation necessarily, you're
Right.
approving the policy. The regulation can be worked upon separately, because it is
Okay.
just a regulation through the policy.
So we'll
So-
just approve the policy,
Right,
not the regulation?
but the regulation can still be, there can be information added, there can be clarification, there can be all kinds of things. If you're not changing the policy itself as it is, then you don't have to go back to a first reading all over again, you can still make modifications to the regulation.
So how will the change in the regulation come about? Since part of it is to do with like the selection process, you know, outlining it.
It'd have to be discussion,
I think we need to sit down in an executive meeting and kind of go take what everything we had here and read.
You can't do it, it has to be it will be in a step session. Okay.
No, I mean, the discussion of what happened here, that could be an executive session, right?
No.
We can't talk about,
Well, policy can't be, there's a very few things that can be discussed in
Right.
executive session,
right.
and making policy is not one of them. I mean,
Okay.
you can't,
Okay.
but you can take this and approve it as adopted. You're approving the policy, the regulation can be modified at any time, and all it has to be done is, it agreed upon by the board has to look at it and say, this is, and that's all that has to be done. There isn't any approval on a regulation.
Right. So I think we need to make sure before we do anything, because some of the points that were brought up, we need to make sure that we could take care of that. I mean, there's one thing about the policy, but the other thing of what we can do with the regulations.
You could meet before the next meeting, the next regular, you could do this whenever you wanted to, the policy. And then before the next meeting, if you wanted to, you could get together in a study session and talk about what you wanted to change on this.
I think
I'd like
that's
to-
what we need to do.
Well, I think we need to do it prior to that, so we have some time to go over the
Next week.
regulation and have a regulation.
Mary Ann has a suggestion.
Sorry, no, not a suggestion, just clarification. I have no suggestion. Under the policies for executive session, the state law, if you have an attorney present for legal advice under the executive session for me to confer for the policy, you can then do it under executive session, but only if you have legal, in attendance for legal advice.
I don't think we have, a lot of these are just to make sure we define what's going on.
That, I just wanted a point of clarification
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that's what.
And so I think that could happen, but I think we're gonna need another meeting pretty quick here to kind of
Yeah,
go over
I
that.
think we do.
Yeah.
Question for Mary, you're talking about the regulations and an agreement has to be made. Where does the agreement process take place? Is it done here in our, before our board? Is it done in open session out here?
It's actually, it's not a board, in a study session, you can do it in a study session, you can make the changes, and then it's put on an agenda as a review, an informational only item, so that you're showing this is the change that's been made, the regulation, and then that change gets sent to ASBA, and then they put it in our policies, with our policies, whichever.
So you can't write policy in an executive session?
Only if you're used, like Mary Ann said, if you have an attorney and the attorney, if you're getting legal advice, then yes, you can. But if you're,
I'm questioning about how we came about.
because the policy was not written in executive session. It was, the executive session you guys met under was meet and confer direction. That's what you did. It was meet and confer direction.
And from the notes of our executive session. I
There wasn't
crafted the
anything
policy based on
actually
what-
done in executive session.
I crafted the policy outside of executive session from the notes that you all provided me to direct me in the direction I was given. So,
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to, I think even if it takes a couple more meetings, I'd like to see some kind of regulation to have in place, prior to.
Yeah, there's some things that we need to define and make sure, or, that way we're,
Did you want to have that?
How and where?
Tuesday?
it's Tuesday.
Would it be another study session?
Yeah, 'cause that's the only way we can talk about it, right?
Right.
So, and,
Next Tuesday, the 19th,
yeah,
Does that work for?
that work for you?
Yeah.
Yeah? All right, so we can get that arranged for 19th, and we can go through it. And again, between now and then, if something, I encourage you to communicate with Dr. Beebe if something else comes out there, for our meeting next week.
I'll do my best to be here at 5:30.
Well-
I did miss roll call.
So we're, all right, so we don't have, do we need to,
Yeah, we need to move to adjourn.
can I entertain a,
So moved. You second.
any discussion? All right, thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Sound like that commercial for when they go, two are saying the same thing over and
Oh,
over again.
yeah.
Maybe we should stop talking shit.
Mine are all gone.
We did good. You gotta clean yourself up. You've been in. You've been part of the process. Yeah.
Good to bad, they uphold that.
Yeah, I see where I've almost had to, like, go on.
Can I ask you, just because I don't want to prolong this discussion, we've already fairly long, but the next time. One of the things I was looking is our bonding capacity.
Well, anyway, I was telling you that I've been reading.
That's the only reason I don't know how you guys feel about that, but it would be, that would be, today we can do your presentation and then we're going to do this work study. I know we did one, but I just did one on the Brooklyn Bridge. We understand our bonding capacity. Because if we're gonna do it, the one of record. The what?
I'd like to read that too.
Oh, that sounds good.
If you don't
Just
mind,
the title.
I'll schedule it.
I'm gonna be here. And then you get to meet the truck.
And then we'll schedule.
And then, the other one, Pat asked me to see what I wrote about the Panama Canal. And so all those oil, with the exception of the Teddy Roosevelt, all occurred between the late 1800s and over about the 1920, 25. And so he did a good job of tying the event in with each other. Yeah, it's really interesting. David McCullough.
So I just need a.
I keep a list of all the
Really detailed. Oh, yeah.
See you next Tuesday at 5:30 sharp.
Nancy, thank you.
I know how you're closing at 4:30. Yeah, we're like, okay, well, I'll be there in about 15 minutes with my car. Were you looking down the elevator? Oh, wait, actually, you don't need.
You don't need to go down.
You don't need to go down, okay.
You don't need to go down, just